sociology major a minor through his high-quality teaching.
There you go.
The force of his personality.
You made your $50.
And these gentlemen are going to talk about the Schelling model of segregation.
Actually, a variation of Schelling.
Okay.
We've taken Schelling and still down to zero a little bit, I think. We actually wrote a program called Summit Sim, and we'll get into that. To start with, looking at community health from a systems perspective. Our model was created for a study we were doing on health inequalities at the community level. Basically from the understanding that agents within a system of communities, in this case a county, act as a system. In any given system of communities, the average health of the community, statistically speaking, is dependent on the other members of the community. Let's see, over a given period of time, the average health of the community remains strongly correlated with its evolving economic and institutional well-being relative to the other communities in the system. And fourth, because the health of any community is so strongly tied to the other communities, the poorest communities fall into a poverty trap despite the efforts to improve themselves. They remain poor over time because their lack of success is dependent upon the upward sustained social mobility of the more affluent communities in the system. Let's see. How much you use Schelling model? Schelling model review.
Okay. A cool thing we actually didn't mention was it does follow a Pareto law distribution to constant curve. Fun stuff. Anyways, Schelling presented a microeconomic model of neighborhood segregation that he called the spatial proximity model, as it specifies the spatial setup in which the individual agent care only about the composition of their own local neighborhood. And more specifically, distinguishing two types of agents. Every agent is assumed to be equally happy with every configuration of his neighborhood, except that he does not tolerate more than a certain fraction of it. We generally shout around 50 or 60% or so to be populated by agents of the other type. Another interesting point is unsatisfied agents get the chance to move to satisfactory position until nobody wants to move anymore. And it is all done randomly. We do not cycle by an X and a Y grid. It actually takes the full array and then randomly chooses a position.
But the Schelling model actually, once they want to move to a position where they are happy, they make the choice before they make the move.
And an unraveling process starts from a more or less integrated city into a rather segregated one, regardless if it's intentional or not.
As most people know, Schelling's neighborhood segregation model has become one of the most widely cited and acclaimed models in economics. There are several reasons. The emergence of segregation seems to be intellectually intriguing. Other reasons are the fame of the model is it's educational. It's unusually simple, combined with an intellectual appeal that makes a convenient means to illustrate the ideas of unintended consequences resulting from the interaction between individuals. The final main reason for the interest in Schelling is related to the fact that segregation, particularly in the term of health consequences, has become one of the most important socio-political and public economy studies today. In the course of our study with looking at the data from Summit County, we changed Schelling a little bit for empirical reasons. Based on our analysis of the data, from a systems perspective, it seemed to us that while the more affluent communities in the study wanted to be clustered around similar affluent communities, the middle and to a lesser extent the lower economic groups wanted to move upward. They wanted to have the upward mobility and be around the more affluent communities. And how we changed Schelling.
Me? Well, the wonderful part is, by us changing it, we have a completely different type of map setup than Schelling's original idea. It partially reinforces the Schelling model in so much as the upper class communities seek to be around similar communities, i.e. the reds are seeking reds, the blues are seeking blues, well, the reds mostly. But however, we changed the focus of the middle and working classes so that their goal is to be around these communities of higher affluence. So in this case, while the reds seek each other, the blues are seeking reds, and the greens, the very lower class, are just seeking the middle class, the blues, in an attempt to better themselves. Schelling starts with a random model to make the point that even with mild preferences for segregation, the community segregates anyway. But however, our point is slightly different against it. Given some pre-existing arrangements among the middle class, poor, and upper, our goal is to show that the rich cluster, the middle get close but never settle and kind of mill about. And the interesting part is the poor, while not settling too much either, tend to be around one another within the same proximity of the map, which is defined as a poverty trap.
Okay. The original method in the class, we took the standard Schelling procedure, which involves a paper grid and the use of coins to represent the agents in the community. This is a thoroughly hand-intensive procedure. With a population density of about 60% on the grid, our class was only able to complete, on average, 5 complete iterations of the board in an hour, which was 1 class period, so that's about all we got. We realized that if we wanted to see any real results on what we were doing, we had to come up with a faster method. Although one of our classmates, Corey Shimp, got his name right, after all that time, got Corey's name right. Corey had the tenaciousness to go ahead and continue to run models on the paper while we were developing the computer program, and my hat's off to the guy to be able to sit there and do. How many iterations did he finally come up with on the 4th model? He sat there and manually did, I think, over 100 iterations manually.
Wow.
On one model.
It's kind of gracious to make sure everyone gets paid quickly.
Yeah. The result of our efforts, this little program we called Summit Sim. We wrote this using Microsoft Visual Basic 2005. Wrote it in Visual Basic. It allows us to run as many as 10,000 iterations of the board in a few seconds. We increased the grid from 8x8 to 16x16, giving us 256 possible agent positions as opposed to 64 positions. Kind of the Tim Taylor theory, bigger is better. We also have a save load function that allows us to come up with an initial agent configuration, save it, and reload it at a later time so we can run different simulations and have that and the final saved as an analysis so we can compare our research after the fact. The default rules in our sim, this is where we differ from Schelling. The default rules, the red represent rich, blue is middle class, green is poor. Reds are happy with 3 or more red neighbors, blues are happy with 3 or more red neighbors, and greens are happy with 3 or more blue neighbors. Reds can move every time to any vacant space. Blues can move 50% of the time to any vacant space within 2 spaces, and greens can move 50% of the time to any vacant space within 1 space. We restricted the movement on the blues and the greens to mirror economic ability of the agents. That lower income people aren't going to be able. They may want to move, but they're not necessarily going to be able to. I see. Okay. Thought you were panicking. Okay. We also have the ability in the program to change the rules. We can change the movement and happiness rules. So if we want to simulate different, if the reds are happy they have 2 or more, and blues are happy if they have only 1 red neighbor. These rules can be changed mid-simulation to find grouping breakpoints, to where if you get a map that settles and you want to see what will happen if it changes a little bit, and it's amazing that you change just 1 group setting, and the groups will disintegrate and reform in a new manner. Future versions of the program, we hope to have the ability added to change the agent seeking behavior, so we can have greens seeking reds or blues seeking the same, and change that as further into the research. Okay. And now we'll show you the program.